Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding, and here's episode 4 of my Road to the Arnold Classic series. Today we have the giant killer Shaun Clarida going against a true giant in James the Shed Hollingshead. Everyone loves a good giant versus giant killer motif, and it's always interesting to see how these might play out. For the versions being used for each athlete today, we have the 2024 Arnold Classic Ohio for James. He did both the Arnold Ohio and the UK last year, and they were both pretty similar, but I decided to use the Ohio version because the media materials were better, which is half the battle when picking a proper version anyway. And for Shaun, we're going to be using his latest version, which was in fact not a 212 version, despite being primarily a 212 bodybuilder, winning the Olympia twice in that division of course. So we will be using his 2024 Prague Pro version for this comparison. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into today's matchup. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Again, this comparison is a true David versus Goliath matchup, and with that said, I know my sizing is probably off. There is close to a foot of difference in height between these guys, and with a big window like that, I'm sure I didn't get it 100% correct. But anyway, like with any giant killer, Shaun will not be winning poses on size. It's impossible. What he needs to do is outshape and or outcondition James and expose his weaknesses. Call me crazy, but I think Shaun does all those things here in the front double biceps pose. I do kind of have to speak in generalities in this comparison because again, it's not about Shaun outsizing someone in these individual body parts, especially in this shot. Collectively, he just looks more pleasing than James, and he has more details throughout his physique. They're both narrow structure-wise, but James's waist is wider than Shaun's comparatively, so Shaun has the much better taper. James's arms are also a little awkward, not so much the shape of them, but overall I do think they're too small for his torso, but they also look a little short. I know that does seem like a hypercritical nitpick, but it does throw off his proportions. In fact, I think Shaun just wins the arms straight up here. Look at the peak on those biceps. What does make the biggest difference to me though is the detail advantage on Shaun. For me, it's those little details everywhere, the vascularity in the arms, the chest, the more defined abs, the feathering in the quads. His quality is top notch. With that said, he is outshaping and outconditioning James, which is exactly what I said a giant killer needs to do. James is obviously still dwarfing him, and on that alone, he can force a lot of these poses to be close, but Shaun is winning on every other front. The front lat spread is more or less the same ordeal. For starters, both guys' shape is worse in this shot, and the namesake of the pose, the lats for each gentleman is worse than their arms were. I do find James to be even more unpleasant looking and awkward than Shaun. Shaun has less lats peeking through than James, but James's lats are barely wider than his waist. I think by Shaun just having the more pleasing shape and some lats combined with his great condition, he gets to pick up the win by default. A very narrow one though. This isn't really a case of Shaun winning, he's just losing less. Now, I do want to explain my judging system real quick. I use a margin of victory point system. If a guy wins a pose narrowly, solidly, or in a dominant fashion, he will receive 1, 2, or 3 points respectively on the scorecard. The front lat spread is definitely just a 1-point win, and I don't really think the front double is that much better. They were both still heavily flawed. So that will be a 1-point win for Shaun as well. We have the side chest now, and this pose is always going to be hard for a giant killer to win. Shape is now largely out of the equation, so that pathway to victory has been closed off for Shaun. Furthermore, these side poses are mainly about thickness and width from the side, things that guys like James win by default against someone like Shaun. Shaun is more conditioned, I'll give him that, but that's simply not enough. He's small, but also narrow, and his chest is awkwardly small, meaning it just has this weird bunched up shape to it. James wins the side leg, his condition is close enough to Shaun's that he can let the size push him over the finish line. I do like the upper limb on Shaun more though, there's more pop to the delt by and try. But then James slams the door with a very big man's chest and very thick pecs. I think it is worth noting Shaun is once again more detailed here though, but that still leaves James winning both halves of the pose overall, and he's just dwarfing Shaun. I'll cut Shaun some slack for detail, I think he earns it but barely. James is still pretty overwhelming, and this will be worth 2 points. Now we're turning these guys around, and this presents itself as a much better opportunity to Shaun. The back double is all about the details. Unfortunately for Shaun though, this pose doesn't start out too well because James takes the lower half. Again, like the side chest, he's bigger of course, comically so, but his condition is close enough to beat Shaun, who is more peeled and drier absolutely, but too dainty. Up top though, things change. James has a pretty unfortunate structure. He's narrow and has unfortunate back musculature as well. Luckily for him though, he's just going up against Shaun, who is certainly not that imposing overall size and width wise. But to be fair, Shaun does have the better V shape to his back. James does have jagged detail in his rear double, but Shaun is very good in that aspect as well. What we really have to look at though is the depth and thickness to Shaun's back. He's making James look pretty thin next to his very dense back. And that's what Shaun's able to do in this photo. And with the low angle of the photo and with the lighting of the stage, it casts a lot of shadows. So if they both share the same lighting, I imagine Shaun will look even better. Going up even further from the back, James takes the delts because Shaun is a little sus in his right one, but he does have the better bicep peaks. I think this is pretty close. You have James winning downstairs, Shaun winning upstairs, and James is a lot bigger overall, which in open bodybuilding accounts for a lot, of course. I am going with Shaun for a 1-point win though. I think his back is better, plain and simple. It's not everything. James probably wins most of everything else, but I think Shaun's back is just enough to give him the pose. The rear lat spread is even more of an uphill battle for Shaun. It's less about detail, and now there's more of an emphasis placed on width. But Shaun lucked out here as James is narrow too. First things first though, once again Shaun loses the lower body, but keep in mind he is more peeled than James, and that is definitely worth something. Now in terms of width, Shaun honestly isn't that far off from James. It shouldn't be this close. Peak width to peak width, there really isn't that big of a difference. Now James is taller and just has more back because his torso is longer, so he looks more immense because he is. He's just bigger. But look at the depth or lack thereof yet again. Here it's especially clear, even more so than the rear double was, Shaun is incredibly thick. And James, for as strong as he is in the gym, doesn't have that level of depth. Look at the lower lats, the traps, and the outer edges of the upper back region. Shaun is blowing James out of the water in all these areas except the traps because James's are good. But overall, James looks thin and he's not as sharp nor as crisp as Shaun in the back. I know the main thing is width, and yes, that does go to James. Maybe the entire pose should go to James too because he has the better width and the better lower body. But for my money, I'm going with Shaun. That back is just too complete, too dense, and wide enough in my opinion, and he's sharper in the lower body. I don't think this will be popular, but I'm giving Shaun another 1-point win in the second back pose. We can agree to disagree. This one does kind of come down to how you view the rear lat spread as a pose overall. We have the side tricep next, and this is a little different from the side chest. But although it's a different equation here, the outcome is largely the same. First up, James stays winning in the side leg. Important note though, Shaun is more cut, just not enough. Then in the midsection, we have a trade-off. James is smaller, he's more streamlined, but Shaun is actually the one with the more detailed abs and obliques. James also has the bigger pecs genetically. Again, Shaun has these disappointing, bunched up, yet also pretty flat pecs. James has a more prominent chest and the tighter waist, so he has that better half-hourglass streamlined shape. And finally, we have to talk about the tricep. James is bigger, but Shaun is more separated than James. So overall, we have a lot of tit for tat here, and as usual, it pretty much just boils down to a size versus detail debate. But there is a third pillar here. James is more streamlined. He has the more pleasing shape in addition to his size, and Shaun's shape is actually a little whack. Shaun does have a lot of detail, but I don't find it to be worth as much in the side tricep. Overall, James wins all the main things from the overall perspective and on an individual body part basis, so he's going to make it 2 for 2 in the side shots and shore up another 2 points. We're coming up on the end of the first round of judging with the abs and thighs, which is a pretty weak shot for each guy. This is a poor pick for Shaun, but I invite you to look at others from other contests. I think you'll find that even though he's genetically at a disadvantage here, he still pulls it together and brings something very passable. James, on the other hand, has one of the worst abs and thighs poses I've ever seen. He has absolutely nothing to offer in half of the pose. Sure, the quads are great and he wins by default because his detail is close enough to win on all of that size, but his abs are abysmal, enough said, and he has pretty much zero taper in the torso, which makes the situation even worse. Shaun at least brings diced obliques and insane conditioning to his abdomen. And his legs are good too, not a lot of size, but he has the detail. And even though it's 50-50 with James winning the lower half and Shaun winning the upper half, Shaun's lower is nowhere near as weak as James's upper, so Shaun has the better average. James's abs are just too weak to even pose a threat here. This is borderline 3 points simply because he's so bad. Shaun does get a point taken off for James winning the lower half, but even then I feel like I'm being very generous towards James. We've reached the last pose of the comparison, the most muscular, and I have to include a disclaimer here because I have some spicier takes for this shot. Yes, it's the most muscular. I understand that it's about size, but that is not the end all be all. There is pound for pound muscularity, completeness, and of course detail in addition to who is the biggest. With that said, even though Shaun should not have a chance in hell here, I think he actually makes this close. Close enough where I could really call this one based on personal preference. Yes, James is bigger, a lot bigger, but Shaun's quality is off the charts. He has the more more shredded legs, much better abs, more popping and more separated arms and delts, and a more detailed chest. All of these things go for either variation of Shaun, mind you. James, while he is conditioned, just doesn't have the details of Shaun. Furthermore, I don't think Shaun gives up too much on a per pound basis. Make him the same height, and I don't think there's going to be that much difference, at least up top. Let's take a look at one more variation though, but really it's more or less the same difference. I think James is a bit better here in the crab shot. I think it's even better for showing off how much bigger he is. But yet again, look how much more detailed Shaun is. It's like a complete Da Vinci painting versus a blank canvas throughout the chest and delts. The legs are also more detailed here for Shaun too, but they don't play as big of a role in this variation. With all that said, I really don't think it'd be too controversial to pick Shaun here. I think with the superior quality, he is just as impressive as James. I am going to pick James though because I believe being bigger is the most important thing, and on a real stage, I think this would be a little more obvious. Who knows though? James is also conditioned enough. It's not that he's bad, it's just Shaun is on a different level when it comes to conditioning. So I think James has enough detail to win on his sheer level of size. But I'm going to make this just a single solitary point win for James. Really, that's a win in and of itself for Shaun. To get that close to a guy like James is incredible. I almost had Shaun winning, and maybe that's the right choice. Let me know in the comments if you're brave enough to give the most muscular to the smaller guy here. Next, we have the second round of judging, which is the judging of the overall physique categories. We're taking a look at 4 categories: muscularity, shape, flaws, and conditioning, while still using the same judging system. Let's go ahead and start with shape. Both guys are definitely not the most pleasing. They're both narrow, but James has that wider waist. You cannot have narrow shoulders and have a wide waist. That's a no-go. I also had Shaun winning the so-called shape shots, like the front double, front lat, and abs and thighs. Shaun definitely doesn't have the prettiest physique, so I won't be heavy-handed here, but he still will win the category and receive a 1-point win. Next is flaws, which will be a tie because both guys have plenty of nitpicks I can make about them. They're both pretty flawed, evenly flawed in my opinion. And no, height does not count here. That's more of a muscularity thing really. I don't think it fits the best in this category. Although I do see the argument that Shaun is so short that you may want to give James the point just for that huge height difference. Not me though. But let's go ahead and talk about the muscularity category. Obviously this is going to James. Again, he's like 8 inches taller than Shaun and literally 100 pounds bigger. However, it's not all about size here. Muscularity is about size, pound for pound muscularity, and completeness. Those are the 3 main things I look for in this category. And Shaun is definitely the more complete one, not to mention the muscle quality is great. Shaun is also pretty close in pound for pound muscularity outside of the leg department. I'm serious, if you make Shaun 5'11" or whatever like James, you'd realize that Shaun carries a ton of muscle per square inch. Some of you may not think this is very fair to James, but I think I have to knock a point off here for the things that Shaun does right, the main one being completeness. And finally, we have conditioning. James was pretty conditioned, however, his type of physique doesn't really have the cleanest details. Even when he's peeled, while he gets grainy and dry, he just doesn't have the most etched in details. And even at the Arnold, he kind of missed his peak by a few percent, and some spots weren't completely saran wrapped. Shaun also gets very conditioned, but he has details galore. Vascularity, cross striations, the lower back is in, the glutes are in. Shaun just has all those extra bits that come from great condition, muscle quality, and muscle maturity. James isn't in bad condition, so while I can't give Shaun a perfect score, I will still give him 2 points comfortably. That was certainly a comparison of polar opposites, and I'm interested to see what you guys think because it is so different. But for me, I currently have this David slaying the Goliath. Shaun won this comparison narrowly with 56.3 points to James's 43.7. And I want to express my emphasis on the word currently. Both of these guys' current updates look fantastic, and they both have great opportunities to improve. Shaun will hopefully be rebounding from Matt Jansen's coaching, and James has had a full year to grow, and they both have new coaches. The same coach, actually, like everyone else. So show day might be a bit different, but as of right now, I have Shaun beating James, not only in this comparison, but in my predictions currently. In this comparison, James had a lot of size, but not the best nor the widest structure, and that leaves an opening for Shaun. If James had Samson's structure, for example, forget about it. The size and structure alone would be too overwhelming for Shaun. But James doesn't have that structure, and that alone allowed Shaun to win the shape category, and that helped him win all of the shape poses. And Shaun is always going to have a great level of muscularity and completeness to help in other shots and aspects. And then the conditioning difference between these two became the ultimate difference maker. This is kind of a game of inches at the end of the day, and Shaun is good at playing that type of game because he has more reasons to win. He doesn't just bludgeon the judges with a great amount of size and a big structure and hope he can just coast on that. Instead, he has details, body parts, muscularity, shape, all these things add up to a big enough number to get him to win. And as for my predictions, yes, it is Shaun over James at this moment. But even in this comparison, it is very close. So I think on show day, it'll probably be even closer. I think this ultimately does come down to what James does condition-wise. A big shredded guy is always going to be a little shredded guy. So if James can get peeled and if Boss of Outlaw can nail his peak, I think he can absolutely beat Clarida. But right now, Shaun is shapely enough and too polished to be overwhelmed by James's incredible level of size. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. What did you guys think of this matchup, and who are you predicting to place higher on show day? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you guys are liking the series and want to stay up to date on all my future episodes, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And if you want to support my channel even further and want to get your hands on some high quality supplements, then be sure to head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, use my code Project10 for 10% off your entire order. That's code Project10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Gotta get that Lexia.